They thought the secret that would shatter our family was about money. They were profoundly wrong. But before we dive into the secret I've carried for all these years, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and drop a comment below guessing what the final twist will be. Now, where were we? I came home early on a Tuesday night, the kind of bone tire that sinks deep into your marrow after a 16-hour double shift waitressing. The air was thick with the smell of grease and burnt coffee that clung to my clothes and hair. My feet were swollen lumps of pain, and my mind was a blurry fog of endless orders, demanding customers, and the cloying, fake smile I had plastered on my face for hours. The house was shrouded in that specific quiet that isn't peaceful, but heavy with things unsaid, like a held breath that's gone on for too long. Each floorboard creaked with a familiar complaint under my weight as I drifted past my father's study. The door was ajar, a sliver of warm, buttery light spilling into the dark hallway. It was in that sliver of light that I heard my brother, Leo, talking. His voice had that polished, smug tone that always felt like sandpaper on my soul, a sound I associated with him getting his way yet again. "She doesn't need to know about the inheritance," Leo said, the words slithering out of the study and coiling around my heart. His statement was followed by a short, dismissive laugh that echoed in the silent hall, a sound of pure, unadulterated contempt. Honestly, what would she even do with it? Pay off her student loans? Put a down payment on some sad little condo in a neighborhood no one's ever heard of? There's no vision in that. It's pedestrian. A cold silence hung in the air for a moment, a held breath, and then my mother's voice, sharp and thin as a razor wire, cut through it with chilling pragmatism. "It's for the best. We're a family, and we have to look after our own. Leo has opportunities, real ones. He needs this right now." My heart didn't just drop, it vaporized. For one breathless, horrifying second, the world went completely silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hall clock, the distant rumble of a passing car, all of it gone, swallowed by a roaring void that opened up inside my head. They were talking about me. They weren't just discussing some minor family expense. They were talking about my grandmother's legacy. Grandma Helen, the only person who had ever truly seen me. And in that moment, standing in the dim, familiar hallway of my childhood home, a place that was supposed to be my sanctuary, I realized I wasn't just the overlooked daughter. I was a ghost in my own life, a specter they moved around and spoke through as if I weren't there at all. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my very soul, my life would never, ever be the same. For as long as I can remember, my family looked like a portrait from a catalog, one of those impossibly perfect photos you see in a sterling silver frame. A handsome, successful father, a graceful, elegant mother, and their 2 children, a son and a daughter. But a picture is just a single, curated second, and it never tells the whole story, does it? It can't show you the cracks just outside the frame. In our family portrait, I was always the one slightly out of focus, a soft-edged figure in the background. My brother, Leo, was the sun around which our family universe orbited, brilliant and scorching. He was born with a magnetic charm, a dazzling smile that made people, especially our parents, want to hand him the world on a silver platter. And they were more than happy to oblige, their faces beaming with a pride that was almost blinding. "Leo is destined for greatness," my father would declare at dinner parties, his chest puffed out as Leo recounted some exaggerated story about a near-miss business deal or a brush with a minor celebrity. "He just sees the world differently." My mother would nod in fervent agreement. He had the ambition, they'd say, the brilliant vision. The fact that this vision never translated into a single sustainable project was a detail they conveniently ignored. My path was different, quieter. I wasn't flashy or charming. I didn't know how to fill a room with my presence. I found my satisfaction in the tangible, in the real, in the patient work of my hands. While Leo breezed through a business degree at a prestigious university, our parents footing every bill from his exorbitant tuition to his weekend bar tabs, I was learning a trade. I became a restorer of antique furniture, my hands constantly stained with varnish and smelling of beeswax and old wood. I loved the honesty of it, the simple truth of the craft. You couldn't lie to a piece of 100-year-old oak. It was either broken or it was whole. It held its history in its scratches and dents, and it couldn't pretend to be something it wasn't. There was no pretending in my workshop. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the family's designated fixer. When my parents needed their sprawling deck restained before a big summer party, who did they call? Me, even though Leo was lounging by the pool. When a pipe burst in the basement on Christmas Eve, flooding the floor with icy water, I was the one giving up my holiday to fix it, my knuckles raw and bleeding from wrestling with a rusted pipe wrench. Leo was always too busy, caught up in some vague networking opportunity that never seemed to materialize into an actual job. He lived at home, rent-free, his life a revolving door of expensive hobbies, fleeting passions, and failed startups, each one enthusiastically funded by our parents' bottomless belief in him. I, on the other hand, had moved out at 19, not out of anger, but out of a desperate need to breathe my own air and prove I could stand on my own 2 feet. I rented a tiny apartment above a bakery where the smell of fresh bread at 5 a.m. was my alarm clock. I worked 60-hour weeks just to stay afloat, patching together a living from my restoration work and waiting tables at night. I never asked them for a single handout. I was proud of that. I mistakenly thought they were, too. The only person in our family who ever really saw me, who saw the person behind the reliable function, was my grandmother. Grandma Helen was the anchor of our family, a woman of quiet strength and deep integrity who didn't care about flash or charm. She cared about character. She saw the world in truths, not appearances. She and I were kindred spirits. We'd spend hours in her garden, her hands in the soil, teaching me the names of every flower, or in her kitchen, the air thick and warm with the smell of baking bread as she taught me recipes passed down through generations. She would sit in my small, cluttered workshop for hours, the scent of sawdust in the air, watching me carefully bring a scarred old table back to life, a small, proud smile on her face. "You have good hands, Clara," she'd say, her voice raspy with age but clear as a bell. "Honest hands. They can fix what's broken and see the beauty underneath the damage. So many people just want to throw broken things away. It takes a special kind of heart to see the worth in them still. Never forget the worth of that." She always ended our talks with the same quiet promise, her hand, wrinkled and soft, squeezing mine with surprising strength. "I've worked hard, and I've been blessed. I'm going to make sure you're looked after, Clara. You and Leo. You'll both have a solid foundation to build your lives on. No one should have to struggle the way you do." It was a promise that warmed me to my core, not because of the idea of money, but because it was proof. It was proof that someone I loved saw my struggle, saw my quiet work, and valued it. When she passed away after a short illness, it felt like the world lost its color. The grief was a physical weight, a heavy cloak I couldn't shrug off. At the funeral, my father, her only son and the executor of her estate, was somber and disturbingly efficient, moving through the proceedings like a man closing a business deal. A few weeks later, when I finally built up the courage to ask about the will, the conversation was brief and dismissive. "It's all been taken care of, honey," my father said, patting my shoulder but refusing to meet my eye, his gaze fixed on some distant point over my head. "Your grandmother's final medical bills were substantial. Truly staggering. After all the debts were settled, there really wasn't much left." My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with a pity that felt more like a weapon. "She wanted to leave you children more, of course. She loved you both so much. But you know how these things are. It's a tragedy." And I believed them. I was 24 years old, and the idea that my own parents, the 2 people who were supposed to be my safe harbor, would look me in the eye and construct such a cruel, calculated lie was simply unthinkable. It was beyond the realm of my comprehension. So I nodded, swallowed the painful lump in my throat, and I went back to my life. I went back to my long shifts, my tiny apartment, and my stained, aching hands. I mourned my grandmother, and I mourned the future she had wanted for me, and I accepted it was just another dream that wasn't meant to be. For 2 long years, I lived inside that lie, completely unaware that the foundation my grandmother had so lovingly promised me had been stolen, brick by brick, to build a palace of pleasure and entitlement for my brother. That night, the night I came home early, was a miserable, drizzly Tuesday in November. I remember the smallest, most insignificant details with a clarity that still haunts me. The way the streetlights blurred on the wet asphalt, casting long, distorted reflections. the windshield wipers on my old car screeching with each pass, a sound that grated on my already frayed nerves. I'd skipped my shift meal at the restaurant, too exhausted to eat, and the thought of a simple bowl of cereal and the blessed relief of sleep was the only thing pulling me forward. I parked my rust bucket car, killed the groaning engine, and let myself into my parents' house as quietly as possible, not wanting to wake anyone. As I tiptoed down the hall toward the kitchen, my shoes squelching softly on the runner, I saw the sliver of light from my father's study. The door cracked open just enough. I would have walked right past, would have gotten my cereal and gone to bed, and my life would have remained a lie. My future would have remained stolen. But then I heard it, Leo's laugh. That smug, self-satisfied chuckle that always meant he'd gotten away with something. Against my better judgment, I paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob to my old bedroom. She doesn't need to know about the inheritance, Leo said, and the words sliced through the quiet house and nailed my feet to the floor. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing, my breath caught in my chest. Honestly, what would she even do with it? He went on, his voice a lazy, condescending drawl. She just wasted on something sensible, like paying off her student loans or putting a down payment on some sad little condo. Where's the vision in that? She doesn't understand how to make money work for you, how to leverage it into real power. There was a rustle of papers, the clink of a glass. Then, my mother's voice, sharp and chillingly pragmatic. It's for the best. We are a family, and we have to look after our own. Leo needs this right now. The trip to Monaco was a crucial networking opportunity. You can't put a price on those kinds of connections. Monaco. My blood ran cold. Just last month, Leo had been on a 2-week business trip to Monaco, his social media a disgusting parade of rented yachts, high-stakes casinos, and magnum bottles of champagne. He'd posted a picture of himself at a roulette table with the caption, "Making moves." When I'd innocently asked how he could possibly afford it, my mother had just waved her hand dismissively and said, "Oh, you know Leo. He has friends in high places." And the new car was a necessity, my father added, his voice a low rumble of justification that sounded rehearsed. You can't expect him to meet with potential investors, driving that old clunker of his. Image is everything in his world. Leo's new car was a top-of-the-line Audi, a sleek, black beast that looked like it belonged to a movie villain. At least, they had told me, by a generous and anonymous investor who believed in his latest doomed venture. The pieces started clicking into place, the sickening sound of a lock turning in a dungeon door, the staggering medical bills, the settled debts, the heartbreaking pity. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed, brutal, and insulting lie. My grandmother's legacy, the foundation she wanted me to have, her last tangible gift of love, had been drained, dollar by dollar, to fund Leo's luxury lifestyle. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back against the wall, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was about so much more than money. It was about worth. They had looked at my life, my hard work, my independence, my pride, and they had deemed it worthless. They had weighed my future against Leo's vacation and found mine wanting. In that single, shattering moment, a strange, icy calm washed over the inferno of my rage. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I backed away from the door, silent as a shadow, and slipped into my old bedroom, closing the door without a sound. They thought I was simple. They thought I was the reliable, unquestioning daughter who would just accept her lot in life. They had mistaken my quiet nature for weakness, my self-sufficiency for stupidity. That was their first and most critical mistake. As I stood there in the dark, the familiar scent of my childhood room, lavender and old books, feeling alien and menacing, I made a silent vow to my grandmother and to myself. They were not getting away with this. This wasn't just the end of my innocence. It was the beginning of a war, and I was going to win. Sleep wasn't happening that night. I just lay in my childhood bed, the mattress that had held all my girlhood dreams, staring at the ceiling as the conversation I'd overheard played on an endless, torturous loop in my mind. The initial shock curdled into a deep, cold rage that settled in my gut like a stone. But simmering under the anger was a profound and bottomless grief. The family I thought I had, the people I loved and trusted above all others, was a fiction. My entire life, I had been playing a part in a play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. For a few hours, in the dark, I let myself feel it. I cried silent, hot tears for the mother I thought would protect me, for the father I thought was honorable, and for the brother I thought, deep down, might have loved me. I was mourning a family that had died a long time ago. I just hadn't been there for the funeral. But as the first gray light of dawn broke through the window, the grief hardened into fuel. My tears dried up, and something new took their place, resolve. I was not going to be their victim. I was not going to be a footnote in the story of Leo's greatness. My grandmother valued truth, honesty, and character above all else, and I would honor her memory by using those same principles to take back what was mine and to uncover the real truth they were so desperate to hide. My quiet planning began not with a bang, but with the soft click of a keyboard. My first search was simple, typed with trembling fingers into the search bar. What to do when inheritance is stolen by executor. The screen flooded with a tidal wave of intimidating legal terms. Probate court, fiduciary duty, breach of trust, fraud, embezzlement. It was overwhelming, a foreign language of conflict and consequence. But in all that intimidating jargon, I found a lifeline. An executor, my father, had a legally binding obligation, a fiduciary duty, to act in the best interests of all beneficiaries. He hadn't just been a bad father, he had broken the law. Hope, fierce and sharp, pierced through my despair. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in deception. On the surface, nothing changed. I still went to my waitressing job, my smile a little tighter, my patience a little thinner. I still spent my free hours in my workshop, the steady scraping of sandpaper on would a balm to my fractured soul. And I still went to the mandatory Sunday dinners where the food tasted like ash in my mouth and their laughter sounded like grinding stone. I learned to smile politely as Leo boasted about his latest venture, a ridiculous app that was supposed to consolidate all other social media apps, his voice full of the unearned confidence they had given him. It was the hardest acting job of my life. I was a spy in my own family, an anthropologist studying a tribe of vipers. I listened. I observed. I recorded every boast, every casual mention of an expensive purchase. During one dinner, my mother casually mentioned they'd finally cleared out all of Grandma's old paperwork from the attic. "It was so much clutter," she sighed, dabbing her lips with a napkin and glancing at me for a fraction of a second too long. So good to have it all gone. It was a veiled warning, a piece of casual cruelty designed to tell me that any proof was gone. They thought they'd erase the paper trail, cover their tracks completely, but they had always underestimated Grandma Helen. One rainy afternoon, driven by an instinct I couldn't explain, I pulled a dusty box from the back of my closet, a box of keepsakes she'd given me over the years. Old photos, a pressed queen and lace from her garden, a porcelain thimble, a book of poetry with her notes in the margins. And at the very bottom, beneath a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon, was a small, heavy, sealed manila envelope. My name, Clara, was written across the front in her familiar, elegant script. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside wasn't a letter. It was a single, old-fashioned skeleton key and a small, folded note. The note was simple. "Clara, my clever girl. Your grandfather and I always believed in keeping a second copy just in case. The truth is always worth protecting. Box number 412. First Fidelity Bank, downtown branch. Your name is on it. Ask for Mr. Cole. He is a good man. Trust him. Love, Grandma." It wasn't a map. It was a weapon. The key felt heavy in my palm with a significance that went far beyond money. It was trust. It was foresight. It was my grandmother reaching through time to help me. The next day, I called in sick to the restaurant, dressed in my most professional outfit, a simple black dress I bought for job interviews, and walked into the imposing marble lobby of the downtown branch of First Fidelity Bank. My heart pounded as a kind-faced woman led me to the vault. The safe deposit box was cold to the touch. I inserted the skeleton key, then the guard's key, and turned. The click echoed in the silent, temperature-controlled room. Inside were 2 items. The first was a certified, sealed copy of my grandmother's final will. The second was a thick, leather-bound journal. I opened the will first, my hands shaking so much I could barely read the words. Just as I suspected, her estate, valued at nearly $800,000, was to be divided 50-50 between me and Leo. And a separate, substantial insurance policy was designated to cover all her final medical and funeral costs. The lie was absolute. The theft was real, calculated and total. Then, with a sense of dread, I opened the journal. It was my grandmother's. Her familiar handwriting filled the pages with observations about her garden, recipes, and memories. But the last entry was dated just a month before she died. It was a long entry, the handwriting a little shakier than the rest, full of sorrow and regret. And it contained a secret so monumental it made the stolen money seem like pocket change. It was the story of my mother's affair, decades ago, with a powerful, married man my father considered his business rival. It was the story of a child born from that affair. It was the story of my brother Leo. My father, in an act of what my grandmother called prideful desperation, had chosen to raise Leo as his own, to bury the truth to save his reputation and his fragile marriage. The whole family was built on a foundational lie, and Leo, the golden child, was the living, breathing symbol of it. Suddenly, everything made sense with horrifying clarity. The over-the-top adoration, the endless well of money and forgiveness for his every transgression. It wasn't just favoritism, it was penance. It was guilt. They weren't just funding his lifestyle, they were desperately trying to buy his love, to justify the lie they had built their lives on. My grandmother knew, and in her wisdom, she had left me the truth. My next appointment was with the lawyer her note had alluded to, Mr. Cole. He was an older gentleman with kind, weary eyes who remembered my grandmother fondly. "She was one of a kind," he said, ushering me into his wood-paneled office. I didn't just tell him about the money. I told him everything. I showed him the will, and then I showed him the journal. He read the final entry in silence, his expression growing more grim with every line. When he was finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me, his eyes full of a new, profound understanding. "Your grandmother was a remarkable and prescient woman," he said softly. This changes the entire dynamic. The financial fraud is a simple, if ugly, legal matter. We can prove that. This," he tapped the journal, "is leverage of a completely different magnitude." I felt a cold knot of power form in my stomach. The first step was legal and formal. Mr. Cole drafted a letter to my father, sent via registered mail, formally requesting a full and complete accounting of the estate of Helen Walker. The response was immediate and explosive. My father called that night, his voice trembling with a rage that barely masked his panic. "What is the meaning of this? Hiring a lawyer? Are you calling your own father a liar and a thief?" "I'm just asking to see the accounting, Dad," I said, my voice a calm, level island in his storm of fury. "As a beneficiary, it's my legal right." My mother got on the phone, her voice choked with manufactured tears. "Clara, how could you? You are tearing this family apart over money. After everything we've done for you. You're being so selfish, so greedy. The gaslighting was so predictable it was almost boring. But this time, it didn't touch me. It was like watching bad actors read from a script I already knew by heart. I held my ground. The call ended with my father threatening to disown me. They, of course, ignored the legal request. "This is good for us," Mr. Cole told me on our next call. His refusal to provide an accounting is a major breach of his fiduciary duty. It strengthens our case immensely. He suggested we petition the court to hire a forensic accountant. It was expensive, it would eat up most of my meager savings, but it was the only way to build the first layer of my attack. I looked at him and nodded, my voice steady. "Do it." We got the court order, and a forensic accountant named Sarah Chun was unleashed. She was a bloodhound in a business suit. She found everything. The spiral-bound report she delivered 2 weeks later was my ammunition. It was a thick, damning document detailing the systematic pillaging of my half of the inheritance. Nearly $400,000 gone. It was all there in black and white. The transfer to the Audi dealership, the wire transfers to cover Leo's credit card bills from Monaco, the payments to home renovators for a gourmet kitchen I had never even eaten in, and the massive $150,000 transfer to Leo's shell corporation, L. Walker Innovations, from which he was drawing a handsome salary while producing nothing. They had been arrogant, so sure of my silence and their secrecy. Mr. Cole closed the report. They've committed multiple felonies, he said grimly. We can take this to the district attorney. Your father, and likely your mother and brother, could face serious prison time. It will be public and it will be messy. He paused, looking at me intently. Or, we can arrange a meeting. We present them with this evidence, and I suspect they will be eager to settle. But the journal, that is your decision entirely. When and how you choose to use that is up to you. They had to see the evidence. They had to face the numbers. But I knew, with chilling certainty, that the financial report was just the opening act. The real reckoning would come from a secret they didn't even know I possessed. I want to see their faces when they realize it's over, I said, my voice as hard and cold as steel. Let's arrange a meeting. The day of the confrontation felt like a dream, hazy and unreal. I insisted we meet at their house. In the study. The betrayal was born in that house, and it would die there. I pulled up in my rattling old car, with Mr. Cole following in his polished sedan. My father, mother, and Leo were waiting in the entryway, a united front of manufactured indignation. Leo leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips, as if this was all just some childish tantrum I would soon get over. Well, my father said, his voice dripping with a sarcasm that didn't quite hide the tremor beneath it. The prodigal daughter returns. With her hired gun. Hello, Dad, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. Let's go to the study. The room was exactly as I remembered it from that night, bathed in the same dim, incriminating light. They sat together on the expensive leather sofa, a tribunal ready to pass judgment on me. I remained standing, a deliberate choice. Mr. Cole placed his briefcase on the polished mahogany desk and stood beside me, a silent, imposing presence. My mother, ever the diplomat, broke the tense silence. Clara, I truly hope you've come to your senses, she began, her voice smooth as silk. This entire affair is unbecoming. The implication that your father, that we, would do anything dishonest, it's monstrous. We are your family. Leo snorted, a sound of pure disdain. Honestly, Clara, what's your game here? Are you that desperate for a handout? It's just pathetic. Grow up. Some of us are trying to build things in the real world. I just looked at them, a long, searching look, letting their accusations hang in the air and curdle. Then I gave Mr. Cole a slight nod. This was a stage now. Mr. and Mrs. Walker Leo, he began, his voice calm, steady and professional. We are not here today to debate hypotheticals or feelings. We are here to discuss facts. He pulled a slim file from his briefcase. This is a certified copy of Helen Walker's last will and testament. It states quite clearly that her net estate was to be divided equally between her 2 grandchildren. It also shows a designated life insurance policy was in place for all final expenses. The estate itself was not to be touched for those costs. A flicker of genuine panic crossed my father's face. He licked his lips. Leo, however, remained arrogantly defiant. So what? Dad handled it. It's all taken care of. What your father handled is precisely what we are here to discuss, Mr. Cole continued, his voice hardening slightly. He reached back into his briefcase and pulled out the second document. It was Sarah Chen's forensic audit, nearly 2 inches thick. He let it drop onto the mahogany desk. It landed with a heavy, definitive, soul-shaking thud that echoed in the silent room. What is that? My mother asked, her voice suddenly thin and reedy. That, Mr. Cole said, tapping the cover with his index finger, is the result of a court-ordered forensic audit of the estate account your father managed. It contains every bank statement, every wire transfer, and every credit card receipt from the moment he took control of it. The air rushed out of the room. Leo's smirk finally vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. My father's face drained of all color, leaving it a pasty, gray mask of terror. Mr. Cole opened the report, its pages pristine and damning. The net value of the estate, after all assets were liquidated, was $794,000. Clara's legal share is $397,000. That money is gone, and this report shows us exactly where it went. He looked directly at Leo. It shows a $52,000 transfer to a luxury Audi dealership. It shows $21,000 in charges for 5-star hotels and first-class flights to Monaco. He then turned his gaze to my parents. It shows $75,000 paid to a home renovation contractor for a new kitchen and patio. It shows tens of thousands in personal shopping sprees and regular cash withdrawals. And then he went for the kill, his eyes locking back onto Leo. And most significantly, it details a $150,000 transfer to a shell corporation, L. Walker Innovations, a company with no clients, no revenue, and no product, from which you, Leo, have been drawing a monthly salary of $5,000. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a crushing, soundless silence of total and utter ruin. Leo stared at the report as if it were a coiled snake. My mother let out a small, choked sob. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. We were just helping him. He needed a start. Clara is fine on her own. She's always been so independent." My father, looking like he had aged 20 years and 20 seconds, finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Clara, son," he stammered, catching his slip. "Clara, we were going to pay it back. We just needed some time." I finally spoke, my voice quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. "Pay it back. You lied to my face for 2 years. You watched me work myself to the bone, picking up extra shifts, worrying about rent, while you were funding vacations and funding his fantasy life. It was never just about the money. It was about the lie. It was about you deciding I was worth less." Leo finally found his voice, not with a roar, but with a pathetic, entitled whine. "It's not fair. You wouldn't have known what to do with it anyway. I had a plan. I was building an empire. And that was it. The final, damning piece of evidence. They still didn't get it. They still believed, in their core, that they were right. Their world of lies was burning down around them, and all they could do was cry about the smoke in their eyes. I let them sit in that smoking ruin for a long moment. Then I took a slow step forward. "This is your chance," I said softly. "You're going to repay every single cent, plus legal fees and interest. You'll sell this house. You'll sell the car. You'll liquidate whatever you have to." My mother started to weep hysterically. "We can't. It will ruin us. We'll lose everything." I looked from her tear-streaked face, to my father's ashen mask, to Leo's stunned disbelief, and I played my final card. I reached into my own bag and pulled out the small, leather-bound journal. I didn't open it. I just placed it gently on top of the financial audit. "You're right," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The money will ruin you. But this," I tapped the journal, "this will destroy you." My father's eyes widened in dawning horror. He knew. He knew what it was. His gaze shot from the journal to me, pure terror in his eyes. My mother just stared, confused, then a slow, creeping dread washed over her features as she looked at my father's face. Leo looked from the journal to me. "What is that? What are you doing?" I held my father's gaze. "I know," I said softly. "Grandma made sure I would. I know everything." My mother's hand flew to her mouth as comprehension finally dawned. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking hollow and ancient. The lie they had protected for 3 decades was sitting on the desk between us, far more explosive than any financial audit. "You have 2 choices," I said, the icy calm returning, making my voice unnaturally steady. "You will restore my inheritance, every last dollar. You will sign the settlement agreement Mr. Cole has prepared, and you will have 90 days to deliver the full amount. In return, this journal and the secret it contains will remain between us. Or you can refuse, and I will walk out of here, leave you the money, and give this to Leo to read. The choice is yours. Financial ruin, or the complete and total obliteration of his family. Decide." Leo looked back and forth between our faces, his own a mask of confusion and dawning fear. "Give me what? What secret? Dad? Mom? What is she talking about?" They didn't look at him. They couldn't. They just stared at me, their judge and jury, their eyes filled with a terror that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the truth. In the suffocating silence of that study, I had finally taken back what was mine. It wasn't just an inheritance. It was control. It was the truth. It was my own damn life. If this story left you speechless, smash that like button right now. Tell me in the comments, was justice served, or did I go too far? And don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss next week's chilling confession. In the end, there was no debate. There was only the quiet, desperate scratch of a pen as my father, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold it, signed the settlement agreement. Then my mother, with a choked sob that conveyed utter defeat. Then Leo, who was still bewildered and staring at the journal with a mixture of fear and curiosity, but smart enough to follow their terrified lead. The 90 days that followed were like a quiet storm. A for sale sign went up in the yard of my childhood home. It sold quickly in the hot market, a final insult to their financial mismanagement. I drove past once after dark and saw the empty windows staring out like vacant eyes. It was strange to feel nothing for a place that held my entire history. My parents moved into a small, soulless rented condo across town, the kind of place Leo would have called a sad little box. Leo's Audi vanished, replaced by a decade-old compact car with a dent in the fender. They had to cash out their retirement funds, their stocks, everything they had built their perfect life upon. Their carefully constructed facade of success and familial perfection didn't just crumble, it was bulldozed into dust. On the 89th day, a certified check was delivered to Mr. Cole's office for the full amount, $432,156. The interest and legal fees had been added, a final, bitter pill for them to swallow. I went to the bank alone. I deposited it and stared at the new balance on the ATM screen. I thought I would feel joy, or victory, or even a triumphant rage. I felt nothing, just a quiet, profound, and hollow sense of closure. It was never about the money. It was about justice for my grandmother, and for the girl who worked her hands raw believing she wasn't worthy. With the inheritance, I didn't buy a flashy car or a trip to Europe. I did exactly what Leo had mocked me for. I paid off every penny of my student loans. I made a down payment on a modest house with a big, 2-car garage for my workshop and a small, sunny yard that was perfect for a garden. I invested the rest, and with a deep, shuddering sigh of relief, I worked my last shift at the restaurant. I started my own business, Honest Hands Restoration, a dream I thought was decades away. I built a life, an honest life, a quiet life, on the foundation my grandmother had always intended for me. A life of peace, self-respect, and beautiful old wood. It's been over a year now. I haven't spoken to my parents or my brother. A week after the check cleared, I sent the journal back to my father via courier with no note. The silence from them has been absolute. It's a sad silence, but it's also clean. It's the clean, quiet space of a room that's been purged of decades of toxicity and lies. Sometimes, late at night when I'm working in my shop, the scent of sawdust in the air, I feel a pang of grief for the family I wish I had, for the brother I thought I knew. But I've had to accept that that family, that idyllic portrait, never really existed. It was built on a lie, and lies, like poorly joined wood, will always crack under pressure. The inheritance didn't make me rich, but it gave me freedom. The freedom from financial worry, yes, but more importantly, the freedom to build a future on my own terms. But the fight to get it back, the terrifying decision to wield a secret like a weapon, gave me something far more valuable, myself. I learned to stand up for my own worth. I learned to see the rot beneath a polished veneer. And I learned to draw a line in the sawdust of my own life that no one, not even family, is ever allowed to cross again. Every morning, I walk into my own workshop, the air smelling of coffee and lemon oil, and I feel a sense of peace that no amount of money can ever buy. I took back my inheritance, yes, but in the process, I reclaimed my legacy, a legacy of honesty, integrity, and quiet strength. The legacy my grandmother saw in me all along. I'm no longer a victim of their story. I am the author of my own,